righty. All right.
All
Welcome,
right.
welcome, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here, my friend.
Yes, Doc, welcome back home.
Man, listen, thank you for your prayers. We just had a wonderful, man, listen, I had a wonderful time, though. I'm not going to lie to you, Doc Wade. We had a good time. We had a good time. But it's good to be back here. Um, you know, what can I say, man? It was an experience of a lifetime.
Wow.
And by God's grace, we were able to enjoy it. So,
Man,
hey, just something to the crowd, man. If you have a chance to go, go,
listen,
go, go
listen.
see the Holy Land,
You
man.
planted a seed. PRT in the Holy Land.
Yes, sir.
So we've got to make that happen. Make that happen. So we are so glad that you're back safely. We were praying for God to return you back to us, and we're glad that you're here. And I know you're having some issues with the jet lag. Is that what I heard?
Listen, let me tell you something. It is 7 hours. It's a 7 hour difference, right? So right now, the real time, Pastor Wade, is 11 o'clock. That's the real time, 11:08. So I read somewhere that for every hour, it takes a day for you to get back to your normal time zone. So I 7 hours, so I think I'm on my second day. So it's gonna take me 5 days. So listen, if you see me going like this on the Pastors Roundtable, it's not because the conversation is boring. We have a good conversation
Oh
today.
yes, oh
It's just
yes.
because of the jet lag.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And listen, some of you are probably wondering, where is our third compadre? Where is Dr. Anselm Paul? He actually is on assignment.
That's right.
He is definitely participating with the Southern Union leadership training that they're having with the student leadership training. So he's there, and we are just so excited that he is able to participate. He was going to try and join us, but he realizes that the connection is not going to be the best. So
Okay.
he said to go on without him. So we're just so glad. Listen, we are so happy to have with us none other one of our favorite PRT members from the Twin Island of Trinidad and Tobago. Mom, it's so good to have Mom in the group
How you doing,
today.
Mom?
And
Listen, we appreciate Mom. Mom is she's a part of the team, Raj. I mean, if it
yes,
wasn't for her, we
yes.
wouldn't have a team, right?
That is so true. And we are glad to have Sister Cheryl Johnson with us from Las Vegas. She is a true and tried member of the team also. And I
And
also
listen,
see Sister Jennifer.
Listen, Sister Jennifer has been with us from the beginning. She was with
Yes.
us from the beginning. So she is one of those foundational members, one of the founders. I say a founding member, a charter member. So it's nice to see her also on the
Yes,
line
yes, yes,
today.
yes.
Hey, listen, Pastor Wade, we got to share this feed, right? I guess,
Hmm.
this is a good conversation we're having today. And, we'll get into it and introduce it. But even right now, we can share, and share. Listen, the information that's happening on the Pastors Roundtable is information that is pertinent, information that's relevant, is real. It gives you resources. And so,
Yes.
again, you want to share this feed with somebody else to
Yes, you
let them
do.
know what's happening here at the
Yes, you do.
Pastors
Yes, you do.
Roundtable.
Yes, you do. Listen, we are in the midst of our Religious Liberty series. Religious Liberty series. Man, what a month we've been having. We talked about the freedom of conscience the first weekend, and the second weekend we talked about national Christian nationalism. And today, oh my goodness, today we're about to jump into the deep end.
Listen, I guess you're pointing to me and you're asking me what's on the table. Is that what you're saying, Pastor Wade?
We're about to go to the deep end. Dr. Henry, share with us what's on the table
All
today.
right. Look, Religious Liberty Series, powerful topics that we're introducing every week. And today we're dealing with the separation between church and state. What does this
Mm,
mean?
mm.
Why is that important? What's the perspective of Adventism on this topic? And Pastor Wade, we have a good meal here, but I want to know who's around the table, who's at the table,
Wow,
Pastor
wow,
Wade.
wow. Yes, definitely. We scoured the land far and near. And when we were talking about this topic, I know the preacher. I've heard of him. He has been sharing during the COVID time. He was sharing online, and he is well versed in it. Matter of fact, he loved the topic so much as a preacher, he decided he's going to go get a degree in it. So he has
Come on
gone
now.
to school for law and constitutional law at that too. So he is not just bringing us a perspective from the lawyer, but he will be bringing us a perspective from the Word of God as a pastor
Amen.
dealing with this topic. And I speak none other than Pastor Kerwin Jones, who served as the PAL, the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the Southwest Region Conference, and he is now pastoring. Not only pastored there, he's also pastoring now in the Texas Conference while at school. So we are so glad to have Pastor Jones with us, and we're going to bring him on at this time. Pastor Jones, welcome
Yes, sir.
to
Glad to be here with you all.
All right.
PRT.
Yes,
Awesome,
sir. Yes,
awesome,
sir.
awesome. Well, Pastor Jones, listen, we just gave a little bit about you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the folks who are listening, looking, and share with them what you would like them to know?
Yeah. I've been introduced as Pastor Kerwin Jones here in Houston, Texas. Man, I have a passion for religious liberty, a passion for social justice, a passion for prophecy, and just showing how all those things are interconnected, and just trying to help people understand prophecy from a practical, relevant perspective. Like, how do I see what's happening? How do I see the events happening today in the prophetic train? Because everything that's happening right now is it's prophecy. And so as opposed to looking for an event to happen, we're living in it right now. And so just when you understand that, what you're supposed to be doing in these times. So
Yes.
and so my passion just making that relevant, help people see the connections between the law, prophecy, and then helping them to see what is our responsibility and what God has called us to do in these times.
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, we're excited to have you with us. And so, Dr. Henry, pray so we can jump right on in.
Let's do it. Father, God, you've given us this platform so we can talk about issues that are relevant, and what an issue we have today. We ask, God, that again, you would guide this conversation, help us to get insight, and then, Lord, give us our marching orders so that we know what to do as people of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Listen, as we get started, if you would just put in the chat where you're watching us from, we would love to see where our folks are today. I know that there's a lot happening around the country, and we want to share with you, but we want to show this video. We want to set this discussion up. Let me share this video with you as you get an understanding of what we're about to talk. Here we go.
America's Constitution resides here in the National Archives. Its Bill of Rights protects freedoms such as speech, the press, and religion. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Today's prevailing opinion believes that means government and God can have nothing to do with each other, thus creating a high wall separating church and state. But what did the Founding Fathers who wrote it actually mean?
When the founders talked about separation church and state, they had a historical context that we really lack.
Reverend Eddie Hyatt, author of Pilgrims and Patriots.
Church and state was merged together, and the church used the power of the state to enforce its doctrines and practices.
He says certain governments used deadly force against dissenters who wanted to worship in their own way.
Those people were persecuted, burned at the stake. Some had their tongues cut out. The founders did not want that kind of Christianity.
And so that's the context they have of separation church and state. It was never the church taking over the state, it's always the state taking over the church.
Author Jerry Newcomb, who wrote the book that made America, says the founders opposed such force.
They didn't want to have a national established Church of America like you have the Church of England, forcing people to believe something that they didn't believe in.
Thomas Jefferson wrote to worried pastors in a famous 1802 letter assuring them government wouldn't interfere with their faith.
Because there's a wall of separation between church and state. And so the way he used it is, guys, the government's not going to stop religious activities.
Then almost 150 years later, more liberal justices and judges began to interpret that to mean government had to wall off any touch of faith on any public institution or the people in it. William Federer, author of the daily American Minute.
And that's when they began to reinterpret that phrase to say, no, we're going to get faith and God and everything out.
Such as the 1980 Supreme Court ruling that kicked the Ten Commandments out of public schools.
They said if the 10 Commandments were on the schoolroom wall, the children might read them, meditate on them, venerate them, and obey them.
We got to make sure that kid doesn't say God at graduation. You can't let a kid pray over their lunch.
Hyatt says the founders would be distressed by these rulings.
To ban Bible reading and prayer from public schools, remove crosses and Ten Commandment displays from public places.
Attorney Jeremy Dice fights for religious rights.
When the government tells you what you can believe and what you cannot believe, that is a significant loss in our freedom.
It's ironic that judges will say, well, we have to maintain separation of church and state. They're quoting from Jefferson, and Jefferson in the Declaration said all men are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Here's Jefferson acknowledging he believed in a creator, and they're using his phrase out of context to prohibit a creator.
In that same letter, Jefferson showed where he stands.
At the end of it, Thomas Jefferson says, will you please pray to God for me, and I will pray to God for you. He violates the separation of church and state in the very letter that gave us the phrase.
And right after he wrote it,
President Jefferson left the White House to go to the United States Capitol at the time to do what? To go to church that Sunday.
in the Capitol.
In the United States Capitol buildings.
The U.S. Supreme Court has more than 50 depictions of the Ten Commandments in its own building.
George Washington was sworn in on the Holy Bible. He said, so help me God, which was the common way of taking oaths. George Washington even leaned down and kissed the Holy Bible.
They did not want a national church, but they wanted God in all of their proceedings.
So, you know, if their idea was, well, there should be no reference to God in our government, then the founders, you know, absolutely were schizophrenic. They absolutely did not mean the separation of God and government.
As Newcomb put it, while the founders made religious freedom a priority, they certainly did not intend to make America into some sort of secular wasteland. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the National Archives.
Wow. What a foundation has been laid. What a foundation has been laid. But listen, all my life, I have heard that we need to separate church and state. We need to be a separated group. Doc, what is the issue of the separation of church and state?
Yeah, so let's, there's a lot of different issues in this particular thing, and I hope we can be able to touch everything and get a balanced approach. So the first thing I want to say is just from a historical perspective of how we kind of developed the doctrine of religious liberty, was that, let's just be frank with it, as far as the principle. The principle of religious liberty, and I want to make that clear, the idea or the principle of religious liberty is a God idea. So, when you look at the Ten Commandments, you see the whole concept of religious liberty. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. Love thy neighbor as yourself. So the concept of render to Caesar what is Caesar, and render to God what is God's is a Christ idea. It's a Christ idea. And let me say that because when Christ made those statements, or made that statement rather, about render to Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's, I mean, he was in the Roman Empire. There was no such thing as a separation of church and state in the Roman Empire. The Roman emperor was Pontifex Maximus. He was like God on earth. And so there was this concept of a separation of church and state, or this concept of a person having the right to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, was actually a heretical concept to the Roman government. And that is the reason why Christians were persecuted, because Christians were seen as antagonistic toward the Roman government. We're not going to worship the Roman gods. We're not going to worship the emperor. We're going to worship and preach the gospel of Jesus. We ought to obey God rather than man. And so Christianity was simply persecuted because they believed in the concept of freedom of religion, freedom of faith, and that preaching ought to persuade somebody to accept Jesus. And so so the concept of religious liberty, and I'm talking about the historical concept of it, was a Christian principle. So for example, you know, when God made the first created being, there was that concept of religious liberty was in place. He had the freedom to worship God according to the dictate of his conscience. He could choose not to worship God. He could choose to worship God. And
Right.
so that concept of religious liberty started in heaven, because it's something that God has given every human being the right to worship God according to dictate of our conscience, because God's principles are based on, if you love me, keep my commandments. And so
Mm-hmm.
that principle, let me just say that principle in and of itself is a Christ-centered principle. Now, have we construed that principle, and have we manipulated, and have we overcharged it, and used it and turned that thing around? We can get into that. But the principle of freedom of conscience itself um,
Mm-hmm.
is a principle that is from God.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So so the principle, as you're stating, is really the government is like neutral, right? When
Yeah.
it
So
comes to
yeah,
religions.
yeah. Neutrality is the word I like to use. Neutrality. So
Okay.
everybody is on this level plane, and the government should not enforce religious mandates on anybody. In other words, the church should not control the state to enforce its dogmas on people who don't believe it. That concept is not anything that God would go with. Yes.
Okay.
So this idea. So where did it come from? Where would you suggest it came from? That especially I was born at 70 Adventist. I'm a third generation Adventist, and I've always heard we don't get involved in the government. We don't get involved in politics. And so when I see people running for government or working for doing, I sometimes begin to say, but wait a minute, that shouldn't be us. But I'm actually being taught differently now. But share with us, where did that come from? Were we afraid that the government was going to do something? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So, first of all, historically, Adventism was they would speak out against issues in the government when it came to union of church and state. I mean, they would there was a Supreme Court decision in 1892 called Church of the Holy Trinity versus the United States, where the Supreme Court Justice Brewer said this is a Christian nation. He made that statement, and he began to say it's in all of our laws and all our institutions. He took that principle and he said, "Hey, look, this is a Christian nation." And the Adventist Church actually responded and said, "No, that's not. This is not a Christian. This is not a Christian nation by law." Now, let me just say this: there's a difference between Christian principle being
Uh-huh.
in the framework of the government and a Christian nation.
Mm.
Those are two different things. And so the Christian principle says that this cannot be a Christian nation by law, because God will not approve of any earthly theocracy. And so, let me just say this: any theocracy or theocratic government, that means that the church controls the state. Any earthly theocracy is satanic. The only theocracy that the world has ever had was when God called Israel as a nation, and He was Himself king of the nation. That's the
Yeah.
only theocracy that ever existed. And and so that was a theocracy. God was still, matter of fact, remember, they asked for a king. They said, "Let us have a
Yeah.
king," right? And Samuel was like crying. He was mad. He was like, "God, they don't like me. They don't want me to be the judge." God was like, "Hold up, let me just tell you something, Samuel. They ain't got a problem with you. They got a problem with me. They don't want me to be king over them. That's the real issue." He said, "I'm gonna give them a king. I'm gonna let them have one." But even though God gave them a king, it was still God's kingdom.
Mm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uh, matter of
Okay.
fact, uh, matter of fact, I'm going to. This was in First Chronicles chapter 29, verse 23. It says when Solomon took over the kingdom of after David. It says First Chronicles 29, verse 23 says, "Then
Yes.
Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord as king instead of David his father, and prospered, and all Israel obeyed him." And so, even though Solomon was sitting on the throne, it was still considered God's throne. It was his kingdom. And so, uh, when God said, "You know what," Zedekiah was like, "God, I ain't gonna follow you. I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm not gonna believe Jeremiah. I'm not gonna follow the word." Then Ezekiel had these words here. Here's what Ezekiel wrote. Ezekiel said, "Thou profane, wicked prince of Israel, whose day is come, when iniquity shall have an end, thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem, take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is low, and abase him that is high. I will overturn, and it shall be no more until he comes, whose right it is, and I will give it to him. So when God said those words, he basically said Israel was already being taken into captivity by Babylon. It was overturned when the Medes and Persians came in. It was overturned again when the Greeks came in. It was overturned again when the Romans came in. And God said, it shall be no more till he comes, whose right it is. And when Christ came, right, he said, what did he say? He said, my kingdom is not of this world. He
Come
said,
on,
no more.
man. Yes, sir.
He ain't doing that no more. Y'all don't know how to handle this business. I'm taking it in my hand. And when I come back the second time, then
Yeah.
I will reestablish the theocracy. But until then, every other theocracy owned by anybody else is satanic.
Wow.
Mercy. And listen, wait a minute. Hold on. But you breaking this thing down, man. No, you breaking this thing down from a biblical perspective, man. You started in the garden, Doc. You started in the garden, and you walked us through the principles of this separation in church and state. And I think that, listen, if you all that are watching, man, listen, I'm telling you, share this feed, because we're going deeper. We are going deeper. So I like Pastor Wade asked the question, right? And I'm with him because, growing up too, I mean, I heard, listen, hey, it's not only is this separation of church and state, meaning, that the government definitely should be neutral, but it also is kind of like discouraging people to run for office. And we were kind of like discouraged because they took this philosophy, this principle of church and state, and they expanded it to don't even get involved, right? And it moved from don't run for office, and not only don't run for office, but guess what? You don't have to vote. You don't have to vote, and I know, don't march, right? And I like how you kind of presented your bio a little bit, your CV, and you told us those 3 areas that you're involved in. So again, let me ask this question. It's based on those principles. Again, you're breaking this thing down, man. I want to be part of your class. I want to be a part of your class. So is there a need? And I think you kind of addressed it. Is there a need for the separation of church and state? And you kind of addressed that. But how involved should we be in the government and government issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so let's look at this. See, people take this thing and they run with it, right? So we're supposed to be people of Revelation and Daniel, right?
Right.
Where was Daniel? Daniel was in the government, right? And he did his thing until it interfered with his religious faith. When they made a decree that he should worship Darius for 30 days, he was like, I can't do that. Now I'm gonna do everything else that you asked me to do, but when it comes to that, I can't, because that interferes with my relationship with God, my religious liberty. And so Daniel teaches us that God is looking for people in the last days who are in high government positions, who can have influence. But when it's time to stand up for religious liberty, you stand up for it. You just don't, you can look, Paul said, I got people in Caesar's household, in Nero's household, that's holding to the gospel. And so how people gonna tell us we can't be involved when God had Christians in Caesar's household and Daniel was in the court? Daniel could have turned in his tags and said, look, man, I ain't doing this no more. I'm gonna be a regular citizen in the empire. He wasn't no slave at that time. That man was up at the top of the kingdom. Look, he stayed there because that's where God placed him. God placed him in the government. He stayed there. And when the government went against God, he said, went against the principles of religious liberty, he said, I can't follow it. I can't do it. But he stayed faithful to God. And guess what? God delivered him from the lion's den to show that governments are not to have authority over the conscience, even though we are to obey the government. We are to obey the government as long as it didn't interfere with our relationship or our religious liberty. But Daniel was faithful in everything else. He had no fault. And so they said, we got to find something against this God. We got to interfere with his religious liberty. And when they tried that, he was like, look, I did everything civil right. I did my civil duty. I serve under the king. But when it comes to my faith, I'm not going to compromise that. And he wasn't trying to impose his faith on anybody else. He was just being who he was. And that's the difference.
Wow. I remember when I pastored in California, Southern California, it was a time when Prop 8 was the big proposition, and that was talking about same-sex marriages and how it dealt with churches. I think that was the time when the case happened when a church refused to have a same-sex couple utilize the church, or no, it was the cake business. You didn't want to make the cake for them, and barred them, and they took him to court. And I had members who were like, "What should we do, Pastor?" And I said, "We need to stand on the word of God." And then we had other people saying, "Well, you can't get up in church and stop people from saying these things." But what I'm learning now is that that's a responsibility we have to share with the world the choice, the opportunity to have the choice to say and talk about what we believe. But that's not how we kind of were taught, that we need to be quiet. We ought to just let them do their thing and God's going to work it out. But aren't we supposed to be the hands and the feet of Jesus?
Yes, yes. Look, the third angel's message is a message against the government. It's like, look, if you do this, it's a problem. Am I not gonna preach it? I'm gonna preach it. I'm gonna preach it to the king. I'm gonna preach it to the queen. I'm gonna preach it to everybody who need to hear it, because that's a message for the government, for everybody, but that message for the government too. If any man worship the beast and image, if you follow this government mandate, it's gonna be a problem. And so, the very message, third angel's message, is a warning against governmental powers that are abusing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, we're supposed to speak out. And that God has called us to do that. He's called us to do that. Speak out against injustice. And that is in the word of God. It's in the commandments. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I have a question here. All right. So again, we're dealing with this separation of church and state. The lines are getting a little blurry now. That's it's a little blurry, not as distinctive as before. We had this ruling to overturn Roe versus Wade. What impact does that have on the separation of church and state, if any?
Yeah. So let me kind of just give my side of it on the issue. So the issue for me is the hand that is moving behind this stuff. And the mentality and the motive behind it. We know that let me just be frank with it. The folks who are who are overturning and doing all this stuff, do they really care about children? Do they really care, or is it a political move to say that we are taking our government back? And I would say that it's more of a political move, saying, look, we're going back to the way we had it before. And the way we had it before goes back to the story, to a long story. And if you would, let me just kind of give a overview of the story and kind of bring us up to the story today. So, when you talk about religious liberty, you talk about the Constitution, you talk about the freedoms that we have today. So when the Constitution was first ratified, and the Bill of Rights rather was ratified, and it said Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting free exercise thereof. That whole that didn't apply to the states. It only applied to the United States. So when the Bill of Rights was ratified, we had national religious liberty, but we had no guarantees of religious liberty on the state level. It didn't exist. So we had religious liberty theoretically, but we didn't really have it practically. All right. So what happens is you have these issues taking place. Specifically, there were two issues that were kind of left alone when the Constitution was ratified. There was state religions. They didn't bother state religions because they specifically said Congress shall make no law when they could have said states shall make no laws. The second thing that they left untouched was slavery. So I want you to see this. These two things went hand in hand: state religions and slavery. Those are two things that were left free: state religions and slavery. All right. So what happens is you have these issues come up. You have Dred Scott, the Dred Scott case. Dred Scott goes to the Supreme Court and he's suing for his freedom. And Justice Taney tells Dred Scott, you can't even be in the Supreme Court because you of African descent and you don't have any kind of jurisdiction. You have no right to be suing these courts because you're not a citizen of the United States. And by the way, African people of African descent were not even included in the Constitution at all. Never included. Never included. You're not even included. And so what happens is that leads to what we know as the Civil War. Civil War gets ripe over the issue of slavery. Was supposed to be over the issue of slavery, then it became the issue of preserving the Union. After the Civil War, all right, you had these 3 amendments that were passed. The 13th Amendment, which was supposed to abolish slavery. You had the 14th Amendment, all right, which was supposed to overturn the Dred Scott case, saying that black folks or people of African descent were not citizens. And then you had the 15th Amendment, which dealt with the right to vote, regardless of color and so on and so forth, right? So you had these 3 amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and then you had the 15th Amendment. Now, as a result of the 14th Amendment was the vehicle by which we started to get these national rights on the state level. That was the vehicle. So it was the vehicle through which we start having. So now, because of the 14th Amendment, it's not just Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, but it's now states shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. But that all came on the back of the 14th Amendment, which also came on the back of the issues of slavery, on the backs of black folks, for freedom. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to say here, there is a connection between the issue of slavery and the 14th Amendment being passed, and then religious liberty becoming not just a theoretical component, but now also a practical component, because of that, now it's on the national level, but also on the state level. All right. So what I'm saying is this: the same people who wanted to hold people in slavery are the same people who wanted to take away folks' civil and religious liberty. All right. The same people who had that mindset of slavery are the same people who did not want black folks to have civil or religious liberty. All right. So when black folks, so I want you to see, it's the mindset that mindset is the same. So the people who didn't want black folks to have civil and religious liberty, it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. So what I'm saying is this whole Christian nationalist movement that is trying to take us back to the old days, trying to overturn Roe versus Wade, trying to bring this nation back to a Christian nation, is that same old Confederate mindset that existed that still exists today. It's that same old Confederate mindset. The two go hand in hand. And so what I'm saying is so I know it was a lot in a little bit of time because I'm trying to share a lot with an hour's workshop. But what I'm saying is it's the same.
Take your time.
That same mindset. So the people who are trying to take away religious rights are the same people who wanted to keep folks in slavery. It's the same old mindset, and that's why you find that they're if you notice, all the issues that we see today is all connected with religious liberties. They're all interconnected. They're all interconnected. And so you'll see voter suppression. You'll see people trying to take away your rights, your citizenship rights, trying to keep you from being citizens. You'll see all of these things, but that mindset is interconnected with the same folks who want to take away religious liberty. It's not 2 different pieces. It's one piece. It's one piece.
So the thing for me is that growing up here in the United States, actually coming from a Caribbean background, I came from a conservative island, Caribbean island, and politics was not the biggest thing for me. Back then. As a matter of fact, slavery wasn't. Although it was a major piece in the Caribbean island where I'm from, which is Trinidad and Tobago, just so that I could be transparent. It wasn't a big issue when I came to Brooklyn, New York, because all I saw were black people, and I was hanging around black people and involved in black people. And when you come to New York, all you're doing is struggling to stay alive and stay afloat. So you're not really taking on stuff. But it wasn't until I got to Washington, D.C., that the concept of the slave issues and things like that became real to me and known to me, that I began to really have my eyes open. But even now, today in 2020, even in 2016, um, when when well, actually in 2017, when President Trump took over, and we began to hear about this kind of Christian nationalism and the concept of religion and Christianity in our church politics, or in government politics, it began to sit uneasy in me, in a sense of, what was I not looking at the same picture before? I mean, where did this all come from? All of a sudden it popped out in full view and in vivid color. How was it being able to stay hidden for so long? Can you
Yeah.
share
So
anything on that?
yeah. So here's the thing. It never went away. It never went away. It's always been here. Now it might have been quiet, but it's always been here. And so and I wouldn't say if it was quiet. It's been happening, but we just were not aware of what was happening because of whatever we were distracted by, whatnot. But man, this thing has been in play for years, and so what we're seeing now is just it's an expression of something that was already there. It's nothing new. It's the same old thing, um, and it's that same old. Um, I call it the dragon's voice. I call it the dragon's voice. And let me say this: going back
Hmm.
to Revelation 13, right? In Revelation 13, you see a beast. Revelation 11, 13, verse 11. You see a beast that comes up out of the earth, having two horns like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon, right? We
Right.
know those
Hmm.
two horns, those two lamb-like horns, to be civil and religious liberty, because in the Bible, a horn represents a king or represents some kind of religious power. All right. And so those lamb-like horns represent civil and religious liberty. But while this thing is professing civil and religious liberty, it is speaking like a dragon. Now, that speaking like a dragon is not future, it's speaking like a dragon as it's coming up out of the earth. So it's happening simultaneously. So when you look at the Constitution of the United States, and you look at the framework of how this country was created, you see that they're professing religious liberty, they're professing these things, but then there are folks who are being brought on slave ships. There's slave trades taking place, and these folks don't have civil or religious liberty. It's professed, but it's not given to everybody. You have the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life,
Mm.
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But guess what? You got black folks that are not getting these rights, and they even said that people of African descent were not included. They were not included in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. And so when you look from a prophetic standpoint, you see that the speaking of the while it's professing civil and religious liberty, you see the speaking of the dragon is it not actually offering that to everybody. And so what I'm simply saying to us today is there is a connection between the fight against black people having equal opportunity, black people being able to vote, this whole crisis with immigration. There's a connection with all of that, because the same people who are trying to take away black folks' right to vote, minority right to vote, the same people who are trying to attack immigrants are the same people who are trying to enforce a union of church and state and trying to overturn these laws to say that we're now gaining control and trying to suppress the vote. It's the same people.
Wow, wow. So listen, let's shift a little bit. So what is
Yeah.
the Seventh-day Adventist perspective when it comes to this separation of church and state?
Well, Seventh Day Adventist perspective. Um,
Do we have one?
you know, you know what?
Well, start with the early. You gave some information dealing
Yeah,
with the
I think
early
I
pioneers. Why don't we start with that, and then you can move on to what do you
yeah,
think
I think
the perspective
I
is
think
on?
we can be I think we can be a lot more accurate.
Mhm.
Than what I think we've lost a lot of relevance as a denomination, because we've lost sight of issues. Here's how we lost sight of the issues. Um, I used to separate the current issues from what we know as what we call, religious liberty. So I used to separate those issues. Okay, you have religious liberty, and then you have what you call these social justice issues. You separate the two, right? But watch this. If you look at the Ten Commandments, the first four commandments deal with religious liberty. The second six deal with social justice.
Wow. 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 Okay. Okay.
Yeah, y'all
Okay,
follow?
break.
So you can't separate the two issues because
Wow.
it's one. So the fight for social justice is the fight for religious liberty because it's the same fight.
Wow.
And,
All right.
and so what we've done, we've dichotomized this stuff, not recognizing that when I'm fighting for one, I'm fighting for the other. Because if I try to take the rights of minorities, then I'm fighting against my own religious rights at the same time. And when I fight for the rights of minorities, then I'm fighting for religious liberty and I'm fighting for my rights. Why? Because the same people who want to take away the rights of minorities and people of color are the same people who want to have a union of church and state. It's the same exact people. There's no difference.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. As
So
you
so go ahead.
No, I was
Pastor.
I was just going to add, man. As you're sharing there, I remember participating in the protests against the killing of George Floyd, and some
Right.
people were against us going out there, especially on the Sabbath. But as you were sharing there, if we protest that, we are then we are also lifting up the concept that everyone is equal, is created equal.
Yes.
And we're beginning to really cross over. We thought it was just social justice, but it's really religious liberty that we're involved.
Yes.
Yes, I see it.
Yes. So so
I love
so
it.
so so the way to see the prophetic spin is not to see them separate, but as one. So
Mm.
everything we've been seeing from the the cold killing of black bodies, from just this rhetoric from the president the previous president that we had, all this stuff was connected because let me just say this. See, what people don't realize is that history repeats itself.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
so let me go back a little bit back to the fourth century, right? Christianity was under persecution. All right. Then you had this politician by the name of Constantine who saw these Christians as a way of getting control of the empire. If I can
Mm.
get the Christians on my side, then I can be sole emperor. Y'all follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So for him, Christianity was a way of getting a nationalized Christianity was a way of him getting political height and political credibility and becoming sole emperor. And so this whole use of I'm going to support the Christian right, that's just a move to say I want to get what I want. I want to be in charge. I want to dominate. I want to be an emperor. I want to be a king. It's the
Wow.
same old mindset. It hasn't changed. And
Mm-hmm.
watch this. What happened with Constantine? Constantine made a deal with the Christians of his day, those Christians who wanted earthly power and who wanted a theocracy. And what did he do? That's what started the whole thing of the Dark Ages because Constantine was able to get the Christians to join with the empire and start this imperial religion, and it just brought us where we are today. So we see the same principles. Politicians do the same thing. Look, I see what the people want. I'm going to please my base. But what I really want is I want the power, and I'm going to give them what they want. They want a union of church and state. I'm going to give them that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that they get what they want, and they'll support me no matter if I'm a criminal, if I'm a thug, if I'm a killer, if I'm a murderer. It
Wow.
doesn't matter as long as I give them what they want. By the way,
Wow.
Constantine was all of that. He was a thug. He was a killer. He was a murderer. Matter of fact, on his deathbed, he thought somebody poisoned him. He wrote a letter and said, "Kill the man that poisoned me." I mean, and so, you see these repeats of history. And so what I'm saying is we're living in the prophetic moment even now. And I think we lose when we separate social justice, we separate religious liberty, we lose sight of the events that we see taking place today is, in fact, religious liberty issues.
Wow. Wow.
Let me ask this question. When we started, because you mentioned something earlier on about the church, the early Adventism, when we first started out. Based on your research, your study, what was our posture? And you did mention a quote where they talked about this nation being a Christian nation. But along with that, what was the pioneers' posture as it relates to what we're talking about now? What was their posture?
As far as like social justice issues and those kind of things.
Social justice issues, separation in church and state. What was their posture when we first started? The involvement of the church in government affairs.
Yeah, now I'm not a super deep historian on that. I can stay in my lane on that, but I do know that again, the church would speak out. Matter of fact, Ellen White made a statement that we shouldn't sit back quietly and just watch our rights be taken away. That our job is to preserve those rights, and that angel that says hold these four winds that's our job. We got to say hold the four winds to the service of God is still in their forehead. So we are to fight for justice, fight for the rights, fight for religious liberty. I do know that a lot of the pioneers were abolitionists. And let me just say this: when they tried to take the message down, even during the Millerite movement, when they tried to take the message down to the South, the South did. The South said, "Y'all, we're not accepting the message because we want our slaves, and your message will tell the slaves that they can be free." And so the South actually rejected the first angel's message, and they were like, "Nah, we ain't taking this thing because we understand what it will mean. Because when you look at the message, it puts us all on an equal level because it says worship Him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. That whole creation, and I think if we understand the Sabbath is all about putting everybody on an equal plane. While professing religious liberty, it also puts everybody on an equal plane and says, hey, we got to fight for everybody's rights, everybody's, equality. And so, now were there struggles and were there challenges? Yes. There were times where A.T. Jones was speaking out against, certain issues that were going on, and he had no support. Now this is in his earlier days when he was doing American Sentinel and all those kind of things. He had no support. People were like not even reading his stuff or even circulating it at all, and that was a problem. And so I think the church has always had a struggle with really, living this thing up. Not really valuing religious liberty at its holistic holistic piece. I think we're doing some things, but I think we can do a lot better. And I believe God will give us more insight, especially as we get closer to the end.
So, one of our viewers added this: when pastors are invited to the White House, do any of the SDA pastors go to discuss social issues or religious issues? Do you know? Are we involved that much in it, or is it because we have this kind of veiled stance of being separate that we really don't get involved to that level?
Yeah, well, from my understanding, I don't work in the North American division, but I do believe that they have some involvement there. So I don't want to say that we're not and then we are, because I don't know all the details, but I do know that they are. I know there's some folks who are standing up for justice and social justice issues and so on and so forth. And I don't have all the details, so I would hate to say we're not and then we are, but I do think that we can do a better job. And I think let me just say this. About just Black Adventism in general. Now, this is just from a Black Adventist perspective. Is if anybody was prepared to share the message, I think it is the Black Adventists. Let me tell you why. Because people of African descent in this country already know what it's like not to have civil or religious liberty. We already, our ancestors experienced that. They didn't have civil or religious liberty. And so we know what it will be like when you have a union of church and state, because we already experienced the slavery, And so having had that experience, having dealt with oppression, dealing with Jim Crow and dealing with black codes and dealing with all these things, I think that we're prepared to say, hey, you don't want to have a union of church and state, because I'm telling you, it's not going to be what you think it is. And so, separation of church and state, in the sense of not allowing the state to control the church to control the state. Let me say that. It's really the church controlling the state more than it is the state controlling the church. When you talk about a union of church and state, but it's definitely something that will definitely destroy and demise the country to its totality. Now, are we going in that direction? Yes, We're going in that direction. Have we completely gotten there? No. But what we're looking at happening in our country today, we're trending in that direction very quickly. As
Mm.
far as when we talk about a union of church and state, and it's being pushed, it's being made known. Look at the Supreme Court. Look at the Supreme Court rulings. Look at. Let me just talk about this one case real quick. You remember when Trump had that what you call that Muslim, that it was really a Muslim ban. Yeah, that's what it really was. That's what he said. Um, and he was tweeting out stuff about Muslims killing folks and all kind of stuff like that. And so we know what was the mindset behind that ban. It was animus toward religion. All right, but yet in Trump versus Hawaii, which is a case in 2018, he got a pass by the Supreme Court to say, hey, he as long as it's under national security, he can discriminate. He can discriminate as long as it's under national security. And so basically he got a pass to discriminate against people based on their religion as long as he used national security. And so my thing is, okay, so now you set a precedence where a sitting president can discriminate against religion if he uses national security to do it. Or if I just use the term, if I have a neutral bill that says national security, a facially neutral bill that says national security, but I can target people, but just don't say it in the bill, then I can get away with it.
Wow, wow. So let me bring this. I mean, in the times we're living in today, I just saw Monique Francois join us from London, UK. The United Kingdom just lost their monarch, and if you really dig into the monarchy and things like that, you realize they were also not just the head of state, but they were also the head of the church.
Yes.
And so, when we don't have that here, the president is not the head of the church. We talked about it not the government not establishing a religion, but you made a comment that we're heading in that direction. We're heading in the United States is heading in a direction where the state is going to dictate to the church how to behave, how to act, those kinds of things. The question I want to have is, are other countries in the world that have this connection between the church and state, are they giving us any forewarnings or signs that we should really be looking out to so that we are not caught off guard or surprised when it does come down?
Yeah. So let me just say this. So when you look at the framework of our government, our government is based on representation, right? And so the people vote, they have representatives and so on and so forth. So it's a when I say Republican form of government, I'm not talking about the Republican Party. I'm talking about a government by representation, because we don't have a democracy where everybody literally goes. It's you have representatives. So the people are supposed to are technically governing themselves by way of representation. All right. That is really the best form of government by representation. Because when you have a monarchical government, then you have too much power consolidated in one man. And the problem in England was that back in the day, the king could be Catholic one day, that king dies, then there's a Protestant king, and then that king dies, and then there's a Catholic queen, and she kills everybody. That queen dies, and then the Protestant sister comes up and she reigns. She brings peace, and then and so there was instability in the government when you had so much power consolidated in one person, right? And so the monarchical form of government was never God's ideal form of government. But remember, when Israel asked for a king, he was like, look, let me tell you what's going to happen when you get a king. He's going to do this. He's going to take your daughters. He's going to take your men. He's going to put them in the military. He's going to do all this stuff. He's going to take your lands. He's going to do all this thing. Y'all want the abuse? You want it? They was like, yeah, we want it. We'll be like everybody else. Look at that. God's like, you don't want this, man. He was like, yeah, we want it. So God said, you want it? I'm going to give it to you. But just know, I already warned you about it. And so God never, any form of government is better than no form of government at all. Let me just say that.
Okay.
Because when Paul says the powers that be or the authorities that be are ordained of God, Nero was king. You know what I'm saying? So a form of government is better than no form of government. But a monarchy is a dangerous form of government, because even though Paul said, the powers that be ordained of God. He wasn't saying the person that be. He was saying the powers that be. In other words, the concept of government itself is a concept that God has placed in the mind of man in order to have organization. So anytime we get together, we're going to organize ourselves to form some form of government. But the worst form of government is a monarchical form of government because the person just simply got too much power.
Right.
And so and so the union of, let me just say this. So the union of church and state is more fragile under a monarchical government than it is under Republican form of government. Under Republican form of government, the people have to give up their rights.
Oh, okay.
Under a monarchical form of government, they already gave up their rights because they gave it to the king. You see what I'm saying? So what's happening in our country, let me just say this, let me connect it to voting and prophecy. When we don't vote, then we're giving up our civil and our religious rights.
Wow.
And so, let me just say, remember we talked about, I was talking about earlier, Revelation 13, when it says that they will say to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. It's saying that they're going to say to them that they should make it. That's talking about a form of government where there's representation, where people actually have to vote away their rights. They have to give them away. And so what the Bible says is that this country is at some point it's going to give it away. They're going to give away their Republican form of government. And they're going to go and say, hey, we want a union of church and state. We want somebody to rule over us. And so that's what happened. So, when we don't vote, we're essentially saying we don't care nothing about our civil or religious liberty.
Wow.
And we're not rendering to Caesar what is Caesar. All right. Jesus said it. He said, render to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Mm-hmm.
Get involved where you need to get involved. Pay your taxes. Do what you got to do. But just don't deliver up your religious rights. Okay. So even that, Jesus said, look, do what you got to do. But as long as it doesn't conflict with your relationship with me, then you're fine. You're good. There's no compromises there. And so, we need to take part in that. We need to be involved. We need to get out and vote. And I'm going on a different scenario here, but protesting is godly as well. When you're protesting injustice, that's godly. Y'all go back and read Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9. Jotham got up and he protested against Abimelech when he was doing all that crazy stuff, killing people and all that kind of stuff. He got up on Mount Garrison by himself and did a one-man protest and said, look, and so he took off afterwards, but he did his thing, and God heard his protest. God heard his protest because Abimelech only lasted for 3 years. And then God started confusion between Abimelech and, Shechem, and eventually overthrew Abimelech because he was killed because of his pride. So, God hears our protest. He hears the protests of those. There are two protests that God hears. He hears the protest of the blood that cries out, like the protest of Abel when he was killed by Cain. But he hears also the living protest of people who are saying that there's injustice in the streets. And so we have a God-given duty and a responsibility to protest, because when we protest, we're fighting for those rights. We're fighting for religious liberty. We're fighting for those things and the dignity that God has given us. We can't see them as separate entities. They're one and the same. Religious liberty, social justice, rights, all those things are all in the same cup.
Wow.
Pastor Jones, we're going to ask you to just hold it there for a second. We're going to go reset, and we'll be right back. Hold on. Wow.
Listen, we are learning a lot, boy. Let me tell you something. This pastor, this doctor is leading us down a path to understand the principles of religious liberty.
Yes.
He went from the Bible and he's bringing it into today, connecting with prophecy, connecting it with social activism. I mean, listen, this is where it's at, man. The pastor's roundtable, Raj.
Wow, I'm telling you, man, this is good stuff. I love how he brought out the concept of religious liberty and social justice in the Ten Commandments, and it should be a part of our lives, that if we don't speak to one, we're not speaking to the other.
Right.
I was like, okay, let's go.
I love it. Pastor Wade, how many subscribers do we have? Do you know how many subscribers we have right now?
Man, I really don't know at this moment, but I know we've got over 1,000. So we are over 1,000.
Yeah.
But we need you to still go and subscribe so that you will not miss what's happening here on the Pastors Roundtable. We want you to go and be a part of what's happening, sharing some things. We have been talking about things things changing, and you've heard that during this month of things that are changing. We want to share with you one of the series that we are actually promoting this week is during this month, the Council on Justice and the Conscience and Justice Council Convention. That will be happening at the end of this month. Matter of fact, our speaker who is here with us, our guest who's here with us, they will be going to that conference. You'll be able to connect with him September 22nd to the 25th. You want to make sure you're part of that. You can go to the website that you see there, sign up so you can gain more insight as to what's happening, what we're talking about. You see the notable folks who will be there, who will be presenting. You want to make sure that you're part of this. It's in Los Angeles, but if you can't get out to the West Coast, you can join them virtually. There are some aspects of the convention that's going to be virtual, and you want to make sure you're a part of that.
Wow, that's excellent. That is excellent. All right. Well, Raj, listen, man, we're enjoying this conversation on separation in church and state, man. I'm enjoying it so much.
Yes. Matter of fact, we want to let you know this is all part of our Religious Liberty series. We have one more week where we will be talking. Actually, we have two more weeks or one more week where we'll be talking particularly about the Seventh-day Adventist historical perspective to really get an understanding of how we put all this together as Adventists, but it will help you in dealing with religious liberty at your level when you're dealing with it in your local church, in your local situation. So you want to make sure you're part of this here.
Right. Beautiful. Well, listen, I'm ready to dive back into this conversation, man.
Yes. Listen, as we get back into this conversation, I want to play another video. This was part of Meet the Press. I wanted to ask this question. We were talking about how you and I shared that church and state separation was big in our minds and in many Americans' minds. It is big, but I'm beginning to realize that this is a question that even the news people are asking. So I want to share this video with you, and then we'll jump right in with our guests and deal with it again. Here we go.
There's some sound. I don't think I hear the sound, Raj. Yeah, the sound.
Okay, we're having some issue with sound there, so we'll get back to it. But there was this I can share a little bit about it. There was this discussion that they had at Meet the Press, and the folks on there shared that the idea of separation of church and state is not prevalent in our society. It's big in our minds, but it is not big in reality. In other words, we talk about it, but it's not really practiced in our culture, in our church, in our work, in our laws. It's not really practiced. But yet, still, when it comes up, we want to make that the big issue. Pastor Jones, can you help us in understanding a little bit about why this perception seems to still have life?
Yeah. So let me talk about. So let me get a little bit deeper in the separate church. There's so many nuances, and there's so many different belief systems and stuff like that. But I think there's a balanced approach. So when you talk about union of church and state, it culminates in the church controlling the state and dictating to people what they ought to believe, persecution, all those kind of things, right? But let me just say this now, and I want to go biblical because I want people to kind of see it. So you hear separation of church and state, but yet we have chaplains, right? We have a Senate chaplain, right? Matter of fact, we have a Seventh-day Adventist Senate chaplain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who we believe God placed there for a reason, right? And so when you talk about separation of church and state, and I want to be very sensitive to this, it doesn't mean that you can't have any kind of religion at all in the state. It can't be enforced, but it can be there. It can be proclaimed, but it can't be enforced. And I want to be gentle when I say that. And I want to say that because, like I say, we have chaplains,
Hmm.
chaplains in the government, God-fearing chaplains. We got, but there should be no discrimination. And when I say no discrimination, I mean there should be some kind of level of neutrality. That means that we don't single out Christianity for favors. You follow what I'm saying? Even when we get tax exempts, churches get tax exempt status, but they're not singled out to get tax exempt status. They get tax exempt status with other nonprofit organizations. Y'all follow what I'm saying?
Right.
And so
Okay.
separation of church and state does not mean animus toward religion. It means more of neutrality. I want to just say that so we can have a balanced approach. Because some people they go all off and say, you know what? We shouldn't have chaplains in the Senate. We shouldn't have
Right.
chaplains in the House of Representatives. We shouldn't have chaplains in the Army. But that's just not realistic. That's just not realistic. But
Mm.
there should be applications of doctrines of neutrality. That means that you don't discriminate on people based on their religious persuasions. All right. So in other words, that should be more of the approach. So the concept of no religion at all, get rid of the state chaplains, get rid of the Senate chaplains, get rid of all of this altogether, may not be totally balanced. Now, when you start enforcing these things on people, then that's when you come into a problem. But clearly, I say this: there were at times, even by Nebuchadnezzar, after
Hmm.
he saw the deliverance of the children of Israel, of the three Hebrew boys from the fiery furnace, or when he saw,
Yep.
or when Darius saw Daniel
Yeah.
delivered from the lion's den, there was some proclamation. They was like, "Look, your God is real." Like, yo, I ain't never seen this before. Your God is real, and they
Mm-hmm.
proclaimed it like, man, that guy right there. I ain't never seen this before. I ain't never seen no deliverance like this before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is for real. But did Nebuchadnezzar have the right to enforce religion on those who were under his government? No, he didn't have that right. So I think there's a balanced
Mm-mm.
approach, and I want to say that because we can't say religion out altogether and then believe that chaplains of the Senate and chaplains of the House of Representatives is okay. So there has to be a balance.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Let
somebody
me
said
let me ask
Roe
this
v.
question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying somebody mentioned. No, go ahead and ask that question. Now maybe we can get into this in a minute.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, what are some of the issues that seem to threaten the separation of church and state? Some of the current issues that seem to threaten it. I think you mentioned a few, but are there any other issues, or do you want to emphasize some of the issues that we need to watch out for and say, wait a minute, these issues are going to threaten that
Yes.
delicate balance?
Yes. So let me kind of draw the issues. Okay. You see some issues going on, right? So the way we got true religious liberty, I talked about this earlier, was through the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and then the 15th Amendment. That came as a result of, that's what they call the post-Civil War amendments, because they were supposed to guarantee rights to African people of African descent and other people who were subject to persecution by the states, right? So
Hmm.
if you notice, those three amendments are what really gave us religious liberty. The breaking the back of slavery, the giving citizenship to every human being or person born in the United States territory, giving them due process, giving them equal protection, giving them these rights, and then voting. Because if you're gonna maintain your religious liberty, you got to have the right to vote. If black folks didn't get the right to vote, then none of the other rights would be of any value because they could be taken away with a vote.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm.
You
Okay.
follow me? So our
Yeah.
religious those three things that came from those post-Civil War amendments are the same three things that we have to fight for today in order to maintain our religious liberty. All right. In order to maintain our religious liberty, we have to fight for equal rights and equal opportunity. In order to maintain our religious liberty, we have to fight for the right to vote. In order to maintain our religious liberty, we have to stop unjust imprisonment and all these kind of things. Because if they can take away your freedom, if they can take away your right to vote, if they can take away your citizenship right or keep you from being a citizen by making it very difficult for you to become a United States citizen, then they can also easily form a union of church and state because you have no voice, you have no say.
Mm.
So everything we see happening today is attacking those same issues. They don't want people to be naturalized. They don't want people to have equal opportunities. They don't want you to vote because if you have those opportunities, you're going to stop the religious right from making a union of church and state, which is what they want.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So what I'm hearing screaming at us now, and especially as we begin to wind this down, how can we get involved? How can members get involved in participating in dealing with this particular subject or even the wider subject? Well, what are some of the things you can suggest to us to share with our viewers about dealing with the separation of church and state, or even the misinformed qualities of this particular issue?
Yeah, one of the simple things you can do, and I keep emphasizing on this, is um, you can vote, take advantage of your right to vote while you have it. Don't let them take it away from you, and then when you get ready to go to the table, you can't do anything about it because it's already gone and it's hard to get back. Number two, you can simply talk about it, proclaim it. Make people aware, speak about it. Don't be afraid to raise your voice about the issues that are taking place. Don't be afraid to call out the particular parties. And let me just say this. Um, Back in the day, like A.T. Jones and all these, former religious liberty leaders for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they would call out political parties. They would just call them like they were. There was one party called the National Reform Movement. A.T. Jones had a big problem with the National Reform Movement or the National Reform Association because they had a stated purpose of making the United States a Christian nation by its laws. And he said, look, this particular political party right here, don't go with their agenda, because if you go with their agenda, you're going to give this country back over to the dark ages and back over to persecution. And so when you recognize the characteristics, it's nothing wrong with naming the parties. Man, look, you need to watch out for this, because if you vote in this direction, you may very well be giving this country back over to the dark ages. And if you don't vote, you may very well be giving this country back over to dark ages. Why do we have a right-leaning Supreme Court? Because people ain't vote. Why do we have? I mean, look at the issues. How are we getting to the issues of a union of church and state? How did we get the president we had the last time? Because people didn't vote. So when we don't vote, we actually energize a union of church and state, because we give the people who want to do it the power and authority to do it without our voice being heard. And so, are you going to hand the government over to the enemy, or are you going to fight for it? That's the question. Are you going to hand it over to the devil, or are you going to fight for it? You fight for it until Jesus tells you, I'm coming back, and you do everything you can. But I'm not going to hand the Lord over to the betrayers. I'm going to let him declare when the time is near. And so yeah, we have to do those things. Yeah, and somebody said, explain why most Adventists don't vote. Because they're misinformed. That's why they're misinformed. They've been miseducated, and they've been told that they don't need to vote. But the people who tell you don't vote. Trust me, most of them are probably voting. So the only person who will tell you not to vote is somebody who's misinformed, or somebody who want to take advantage of your rights. All right. And so you gotta know for yourself. You can't go by what you hear. We gotta study the scriptures. And when I say study the scriptures, y'all, we gotta go back and dig through the whole Bible. Look at what the prophets are saying. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. Look at what they're saying. They're speaking against different nations, speaking about issues that are taking place. Look at the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is all about governments and the abuse of governments, and God saying this ain't right. So you got to get involved. You gotta do what you got to do. But you can speak out, use your power to vote, and just make people well informed. And let me just say, we're on the trend back. I mean, we're on the trend back to union of church and state. But we got to do everything we can to avert the threat and danger.
Wow. Wow. Listen, a lot of folks, and I'm about to cross the line here. A lot of us feel that we, as was asked, why Adventists don't vote, but there is a strong political following in the Adventist Church, especially among Caucasian Adventists. But yet still among African American Adventists, we tend to not want to speak up. We tend not to want to get involved, and sometimes we are that way because our leadership is not pushing us. Our leadership is not speaking out, is not directing us, guiding us. How can some members, where can they go if you know of any place or any resources? Can they go to get educated on the issues that face them? Maybe is there a radio station? Is there a television? Is there a YouTube channel? Where can they go to get the information? Do you have anything like that?
Well, I think that you can. Um, Let me just say this. Not don't don't hide away from what's happening.
Mm.
Open your ears, look at what's going on. You know, I mean, sometimes the internet is a good search and find out, hey, well, how can I get involved in this? How can I do this? Where is this in my state and all that kind of stuff, but get involved in your sphere. Try to widen your sphere,
Hmm.
and do what you need to do. I know for every person it's a little bit different. But you really need, I believe it starts with informing yourself. Inform yourself, because people are going to challenge your belief system. They're going to challenge what you say. But you got to believe this stuff. You got to believe this stuff. Like, and when you believe it, you can fight against all the miseducation, all the stuff that's going on, and then you can just go forward. You'll find your way. you know but inform yourself. Don't just go by what people say, what people talk about. Inform yourself. And let me just say this. Back to basics. Get into the scriptures.
Mm.
Read, man. Let that thing get into you, because people will tell you stuff, man, and that stuff all against what the word of God. I mean, the Bible. I mean, look,
Yeah.
you can't read Daniel and Revelation without coming in conflict with the government. You can't do it. It don't exist. You connected. You're gonna be fighting against it. You're gonna be fighting all kind of stuff. So you got to be involved.
Mhm.
And so just know what's going on. Inform yourself. Just do what you got to do to get involved. I can't give any specifics, but I just want to say inform yourself. That's the most important thing. Educate yourself, inform yourself, and then go forward in what you can.
Well, listen, Pastor Jones, Dr. Jones, Professor Jones, listen, we have enjoyed the conversation today. I mean, taking us through the biblical perspective, letting us know the issues that we're facing today that deal with church and state, and then challenging us, letting us know that we need to get involved. Do not be afraid to get involved. In fact, we have a mandate to get involved so that we can be responsible Christians. I like that. So again, man, thank you for coming on. We're gonna have to have him on again, Pastor
Yes,
Wade. We
yes,
got
definitely, definitely.
it. Yeah, I like that, because we didn't really get time to really unpack that Revelation chapter 13. You hinted around it, you talked about it, but to dive into that thing, man, I would love to hear your perspective on that. And we talked about that lamb-like beast, but what about that's going to speak like a dragon? But let's talk about the image of the beast. Let's talk about
Yeah,
man. Listen,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
good stuff, man. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yes, yes,
Amen.
Pastor Jones. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank
Amen.
you for giving us that bridge from the Word of God to the life that we live,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the prophetic life. We tend to want to be very nice and what would Jesus do? But you brought the Word today. I must say that. Thank you so much, and we appreciate what you have shared. And I just want to ask one thing: if someone wants to connect with you, how can they
Yeah.
connect with you to learn some more? Even maybe invite you to come to their church so that you can share.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. You can. I mean, look me up on Facebook. I got to get. I guess I got to get a website or something so folks. But yeah, you can look me up on Facebook. Kerwin Jones should come up there. It's public.
Mhm.
It's a public profile. And just reach out to me through Messenger, and whatnot. And yeah, definitely love to connect. But I think that we're living in serious times, and we got to make it clear now. We don't make it clear now, we're going to miss a grand opportunity to be able to make a change. And so the time is now. It is. It's now.
Excellent. I don't know. Are you on the on the side that is planning this convention that's happening end of the month? What can you say to our folks about that
Right.
convention as a
Yes.
plug?
Yeah, let me encourage you. You can still register. You can still come. I think the plane tickets are still cheap. Um, in California, near Los Angeles, I want to invite you to come out. Please come out, be a part of it. Get your soul filled. Come and learn, educate yourself. This is part of the process. Come educate yourself and take the information that you get and use it. Use it. Go out in the community and use it. Connect with people, and teach it, preach it, talk it, and live it. And I believe the Lord will bless you in a mighty way and bless us all in a mighty way.
Awesome.
And from my understanding, that the speakers and the presenters, they're not just all Adventists. They're coming from different areas,
That's
right?
right.
Different,
Yes.
right? Coming
Yes.
together with one commonality, and that is to promote social justice, or be conscious of the issues that are taking place within our society and doing something about it, right?
That's right. That's right. Correct. So, and I know we said this earlier, but remember the 10 Commandments, religious liberty, and social justice.
Yes.
The first 4 commandments, religious liberty. The last 6, social justice. They're interconnected. They're not separate. They're one. And so when you do this, when you attend these conventions, when you get involved, you are doing religious liberty. It's one and the same.
Excellent.
Wow, beautiful.
Excellent. So, Pastor Jones, please give our regards to your family. Thank you for thanking them for allowing you to be with us today. And based on what our folks said, they want to have you back. If you enjoyed what you heard today, let Pastor Jones know. Just put it in the chat, thanking him, let him know how much you appreciated what he shared, and we will definitely lock him in again as we continue. Remember that we are having our Religious Liberty series for the rest of this month. We have one more show to come up at the end of this month. Next week is our last week for season 5. We will then take a 2-week break, and then we will start with season 6 on October. I think it's October 15th or the middle of October. You'll hear more about that as we head out to there. But again, thank you for being a part of Pastors Roundtable. We want you to know that you can definitely support us. There are the support information for Pastors Roundtable. We thank you for what you're doing. We thank you, Pastor Jones, for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week, where we will continue to try to strive to make ministry resource relevant.
Man, you just said it out of order, Pastor Wayne.
I know, but I want you to do your part. Resource relevant
and real.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll see.